Electrocast.
Hold on to your butt.
Come on, sucker. Let's get it on.
Oh, you want to fight? You want to fight?
I do not entertain hypotheticals. The world as it is vexing enough.
You don't know anybody named Iris? I don't know nobody named Iris.
Can I have a piece of toast?
I don't give a damn what you think you are entitled to.
We are changing the course of history as we see it. That is what Wesley demands.
How could you do this to me? Really, I want to know. Why did you do that?
What you feel only matters to you.
And the truth shall set you free.
And that's all? No, not for the real fire.
We offer you bond, a family that very few can understand.
Help me.
Help you.
And don't do drugs.
Or Whatever Movies with Wesley and Iris. What up and welcome to Or Whatever Movies. I'm your co-host Iris and I'm here with my older brother,
Wesley.
And today we are discussing Onward. So it's playing theatrically, though limited. It's playing on VOD and it's playing on Disney+.
Yeah, but cool that it's playing on Disney+, right? You would think that they would wait, a few months, but yeah, they seem to be on top of making sure that trying to keep people as happy as possible while they're sheltering in place.
Yeah, I think that, well, amongst the many other social experiments that are happening right now with the coronavirus crisis, I think that this will be an interesting case study for shortening those release windows, if not going day and date with some of this stuff. Like, what is it going to look like if you start streaming simultaneously online and in the theaters? Yeah,
there were some analysts who called Onward one of Pixar's first major failures, but it's a different metric, tracking it by online streaming numbers. This is relatively new, and so I don't think it's a failure by any means. I'm sure that a whole lot of people are watching it.
But in terms of its creative successes or failures, what did you think about Onward, especially, in context with other Pixar movies?
So I will give Pixar movies the benefit of the doubt a lot of the time. Pixar was untouchable back in the day, and then they made a few stinkers like Cars 2 and The Good Dinosaur. But I'm still excited when a Pixar movie shows up. I'm just a little bit leery. That doesn't mean I won't see it. So Onward, when they started showing the previews, around Toy Story 4, last year's big movie, I can't say that I was excited.
Yeah, I have to say on the outset, Onward doesn't look particularly appealing. The character designs aren't terribly attractive to me.
Yeah, the characters don't look good. They're almost made for plushies. They're almost designed that way. It's difficult for D&D because they're all nerds, but the designs didn't look cool. You know what I mean? They looked rounded and soft and not Game of Thronesy, I guess. But they looked like cartoons that would be, I guess, fitting for the Disney model, but it didn't look cool. It looked sort of cheesy and kind of thrown together and half-assed. This is conceptually from the outset.
Yeah.
You're hoping that those trailers grab you in a big way, and then you're like, that doesn't look amazing, and it doesn't have the cohesion of theme and design that I felt like, the greats did.
Right, the great Pixar movies.
Right, like WALL-E, what that movie is. And I think for good reason they didn't show any of the humans in the WALL-E trailers. That was kind of a surprise. But I didn't particularly like the look of the humans in WALL-E either. And that was, quite a while ago. But humanoid characters has never been a strong suit of Pixar.
And I think that you hit the nail on the head when you talked about WALL-E and knowing what it is from the outset. The key art doesn't tell me what this thing is about. I see blue dudes in a car. It says Onward, and that's it.
Yeah, if they're going on a quest, they're going in an old 70s Chevy van.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like they show swords and dragons. Like, if you want to get that Game of Thrones vibe, it certainly wasn't apparent in the key art. You can't even tell that these dudes are elves. In fact, halfway through the story, I didn't know that these dudes were elves until someone said it.
It was almost like Jack Black and Tenacious D went in and pitched a movie to Pixar, and they were like, we love it.
Yeah, which is totally fun.
I was actually surprised. I thought that Jack Black would have been ideal to voice that character, to voice the Barley character that Chris Pratt did.
Yeah. Chris Pratt is so vanilla to me. I mean, his performance as Barley was serviceable, but like him as an actor, not a lot to hang my hat on with him.
I agree that he's sort of not bland, because he can definitely look intense, and I think he's got the goofiness that's really relatable and marketable for sure. I think that bland vanilla, like sort of doing the fantasy voice, really worked well in this movie. He was like, you know, thou shalt not blah blah blah, and he was kind of doing the affected sort of grandiose Lord of the Rings type voices while being a totally normal bland vanilla dude.
Yeah. Do you know people like that in real life? I totally do.
Yeah, I think that it's the idea that a totally dorky normal dude, I guess, despite him being an elf, trying to be a fantasy guy, you know, who wanting to be a wizard or a mage or whatever.
Yeah, which I get.
But I've seen an awful lot of Chris Pratt and Tom Holland lately. I mean, they're big in the Avengers movies. Spider-Man and Guardians of the Galaxy, they each have their own franchise. But especially in the last couple of years, and especially for Disney, they've been around an awful lot. So I felt like this was just kind of lazy. Hey, you guys want to roll over? You seem like you have appropriate voices. But I did like Chris Pratt. I think he sounded appropriate as Barley, as, like I said, the nerdy kind of guy who was trying to be more fantasy, more cool, more rock and roll than he was. But Tom Holland has a weird childlike voice that I think he'll be able to apply to animated movies and things like that forever. He's definitely got the teenager vibe going. He's a much more convincing teenager than Andrew Garfield was as Spider-Man.
Huh.
And he was in Spies in Disguise. And I think he really has a youngish voice that will translate well for a long time. It's like Jay Baruchel in How to Train Your Dragon. That guy's like in his, you know, mid-30s or whatever, but he sounds so appropriate as a young guy.
Yeah. Yeah, Tom Holland was great, although he's British.
Yep.
Like, his American accent is flawless.
Yeah, pretty spot on. And then Chris Pratt tries to do his British accent when he talks in the wizard voice or whatever.
Yeah. The wizard kind of medieval kind of fantasy voice is always British for some reason.
Yeah, back when a British accent denoted intelligence and wisdom.
Right, exactly. It kind of still does. People always choose British voiceover actors for like the smart people.
So, but yeah, it didn't look good. The trailers didn't inspire me at all. That didn't stop me from getting IMAX tickets in opening weekend, and we did the thing. Kelly was excited about it, and I was like, okay, that's fine. We'll go see it and see what it's about. At the very least, I always felt that Pixar had a thing that they would dramatically advance. Every time they released a movie, there was a good reason. Not to say that that's the only reason, but for example, in WALL-E, they had the photorealistic sort of vibe for Earth so down, and real-looking surfaces and dirt and the metal and the rust and all that stuff.
For Monsters, Inc., the amazing hair.
Yeah, the hair textures, exactly.
For Nemo, underwater.
The particles in the water and the sort of haze, yeah, and the way the water moved, absolutely. For Toy Story 4, I wanted to see what that would be. And Toy Story 4, in the first Toy Story, they weren't able to replicate rain hitting the ground, so you never really see the splashes. And then they kind of addressed that at the top of Toy Story 4 with the tremendous scene in the rain with the car.
Oh, yeah.
And Woody, an extended rain sequence to where like, hey, remember that thing that we couldn't do? Well, we did the heck out of it this time. And so I was waiting to see what the kind of gimmick would be for Onward.
Yeah.
The thing that they could really hang their hat on. And I didn't really see a lot of that. And I was kind of expecting that. But I will say also that Pixar's strength is to take the purpose of animation, I think, is to make believable the fantastic elements of, you know, magic, to make it look cool and sparkly and not like a cheesy effect. Animation can do that so well, like it does with Elsa's Power and Frozen. Mm-hmm. It just makes it so bright and vivid and magical.
Yeah.
That I think it lends really well to animation. So I think that they had all the pieces in place,
right,
but I thought it looked awfully cheesy.
You have to have a really good reason to justify doing something in animation because of how expensive it is, because of how time and labor intensive it is, especially how crucial it is to tell for the story to be told visually. Aside from the magic in this, I mean the magic and the fantastical characters, I guess, there wasn't a lot of reason to do this in animation. I mean, I think the fantastical characters were so humanoid in themselves that they didn't feel like ancient creatures or fantastical creatures. But my point is, that this movie made me think maybe there's another reason to do something in animation. And I'm developing a new theory that you can do things emotionally in animation that you can't necessarily do in other formats.
Explain that.
So this movie is so, there were so many moments that were really emotional for me. Like something as simple as the dad's foot feeling around and then feeling his son's feet for the first time got me all choked up. And maybe it's because I'm a mom and I'm a lot more emotional these days, or maybe there was something to it. And then at the end, when Barley gets his moment with the sun setting behind them and he gets to talk with his dad and they do a hug, it's like, I feel like animated movies, it's safer for audiences. Audiences are more willing to open themselves up to the emotion that an animated movie can deliver, because somehow it's safer because it's not real.
Interesting. Maybe there is also something to the fact that they can unreservedly swell the music and adjust the colors. So there's a dramatic sunset, and in these not realistic, but these hyper accentuated features, like your eyes can become huge,
right,
and your mouth drops open.
Yeah.
And it's cute in a way that's more difficult to read on a human face, but can be manipulated so perfectly, in animation and painstakingly, because you glossed over the fact that it's time and labor intensive, but we're talking 5 years generally, as we mentioned in our Frozen 2 review, to produce a quality feature-length animated movie.
Right, which doesn't even include like development necessarily. Like that's like fingers on keyboards actually crafting this thing.
Yeah, man, some people are lucky that they can work on post-production for animated movies forever from home.
Exactly, right now.
As opposed to the movies, yeah. So emotionally speaking, I had a hard time because I think Chris Pratt and Tom Holland as Ian and Barley were fine. I wasn't interested in the mom character or really the Colt character, the stepdad. I understand why they were setting out on their quest, even though it was kind of dorky, and they were set out to find and recreate their dad. But when the dad showed up, and indeed for 90% of the dad's screen time, you can't connect with him emotionally. I get that his little gestures were clever, but it never felt like a dad, and it never felt too emotionally redeeming for me. I think it was nice, and you can read it on Ian and Barley's faces, but from the dad, I kind of got nothing. I thought the dancing scene in the van was a little bit cheesy, and that was their moment to connect. And obviously, I will say that they set up a lot of stuff admirably. The idea of, your dad, I knew him, and man, he always wore the craziest purple socks. And you see those purple socks and the things that are indicative of their dad as a character.
Did you feel like the plant and payoff in this was obvious?
No, because I didn't know where the movie was going. Pixar is generally pretty restrained in their trailers and things. So I felt like it was more satisfying than anything. And it was definitely more impactful the second time around. But no, I think that it worked well. Setting up in the van, in Barley's van, the air conditioner that's just over the top blasting, right? And like peels your lips back.
Right.
And then they set that up initially, and then that's what he used to blow the pixies off his face.
Right.
When Ian is trying to drive. I felt like the setups were serviceable. They are definitely necessary in movies.
I did think that I thought that it worked. With animated films too, there's a lot of burden on the filmmakers to set up the world and establish its rules. So sometimes it can feel a little exposition-y, and I felt like the plant and payoff worked. Like I felt like everything was appropriately set up, but maybe it felt I felt like every piece of story information we got was set up for something that that was going to pay off afterward. And I felt this more in the second viewing, so maybe I was watching it more critically. But even in the first moment when Colt comes by and we don't know that he is Ian and Barley's mom's boyfriend, he comes by and shows the video of Barley in the fountain that we see at the very end of the film. Like everything was very tediously, very intentionally set up in this movie.
I understand what you're saying, and I think that there's a separation. There's the way this movie is constructed, and then there's the emotional sort of carrying you, right? And I will concede that the emotionalism from the outset didn't grab me in the way that it may have you. I was just sort of hanging on to the things that would make me connect. And so when they fed me the setups that would later pay off, I think it was fine. It wasn't as in my face as maybe it was for you. I was just sort of looking to be immersed. I was looking for toeholds to carry me along, and most of the time that was just the clever stuff that the plays on references to other fantasy things like Lord of the Rings, and just a cool way that they handled this sort of society populated by non-human creatures.
With unicorns as pigeons or seagulls digging through our trash.
So we conferred about that, and I think and Kelly and I came up with raccoons.
Oh,
that
raccoons.
Was the closest we can go. Like, because what hisses at you?
Well, seagulls hiss.
And so apparently that was hearkening back to an old legend, one of the original legends of unicorns as being difficult, standoffish creatures.
Huh. Interesting.
And not the majestic, flowing-haired beauties and companions of ladies that we know today.
Or that are depicted in The Last Unicorn, which we'll get to.
Yeah, we should do like like a fantasy theme one of these days.
But you referenced Lord of the Rings, and
yep.
I have a long list of movies that this made me think of, and my list really begs the question: is Onward a derivative work, or is Onward totally in the zeitgeist?
I would say more zeitgeist, and it's an homage. It definitely draws from themes. And now, so how many of this list, going down and scanning it if you've got it in front of you, how many of this list of movies are Disney properties?
At least 2, 3.
But this is kind of my point. The whole fantasy idea and the zeitgeist of what fantasy is, and definitely kind of trending away from dorky and being more cool in the Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones kind of style, is, I think, where Onward differed. I think this was more of a dorky D&D, Stranger Things, Will in a robe and pointed cap, Merlin the magician with moon and stars on it, silk dorky robe kind of D&D. It wasn't cool. The whole world looked Smurfy, and I had a real problem with that.
Yeah, Smurfy.
Kelly noted in the second time around that in converting, the human world or whatever to the fantasy world, all the buildings downtown had turrets on them.
Huh.
But the houses were still kind of mushroomy, at least some of them. And so
they were in
nerdy
Mushroom
fantasy. Okay, but I did notice a lot of homages, especially when this whole operation got underway. In particular, do you have Indiana Jones on your list?
I have Indiana Jones on my list.
Because that was really thorough. I mean, down to specifics, like the gelatinous cube, spoiler, was totally the boulder, leaping over the pit to escape from the gelatinous cube in order to get to the stone doorway that was sliding closed and pulling Dad through at the last minute, like the iconic Indy hat grab.
Yeah.
Stepping across the invisible bridge, which was straight out of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Oh, yeah.
And not to mention the saw blade that cut the Dad in half came straight out of the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade as part of the test of penitence to get to the Holy Grail, which is, I will say, the only thing that I saw coming. I didn't think they were actually going to do it, but when Half Dad was all pillows and sunglasses from the top up, I was like, it'd be really cool if they did the cutting in half thing on their epic quest, and they did it, and it was very satisfying.
Well, Paloma calls Half Dad Silly Pants. And there's another Indiana Jones reference at the very top of the film, the opening montage that's talking about the magical world, where he is getting the fetish or the totem or the whatever from the temple, and then the dragon comes out. Like, that was very Indiana Jones, with it on a pedestal, spotlighted on a pedestal and stuff.
Very cool. And Indiana Jones, of course, a Disney property. So what else you got?
Yep, so that was one Disney property. Then there is a reference to Ratatouille, when in the liquor store, Half Dad or Silly Pants is bumbling around and the sprites are like, "You got a problem, sunglasses?" And then he does the turn and the deadpan.
The sassy head lean?
Yes, which is straight out of Ratatouille when Remy is operating Linguini and Linguini is asleep. And
yep.
his girlfriend's trying to have like a heart-to-heart with him, and then he like does the like sunglasses slump, and she slaps him on the face and wakes him up.
This one made me laugh. I don't remember if that one made me laugh, but it was so perfect with the lumpy dad character.
Yes.
The lumpy pillow dad, silly pants. But if we're going to go down the list of all the references to Disney movies, there's a whole bunch of them.
That's true.
So those little details, not only connecting them to Disney properties in a way that fans of other movies could be like, oh, I get it, but to tie in, but just the way that you would cleverly navigate this fantasy world in the way that the human world is. Liquor stores with all human-sized doors and human-sized motorcycles that these pixies have to deal with, which I thought was kind of clever. It wasn't until the freeway chase that I kind of started to smile and really appreciate, and like, okay, we may actually be going on an adventure here.
Oh, yeah.
But just the way they would operate the motorcycles and things, and the way the dad is flopping around and shaking his fist at them and stuff.
Right.
And the little tiny inferiority complex Napoleon-esque sort of pixies are all angry. Did you note that they were chugging pixie sticks?
Yes.
So really clever the way that they can kind of do those things, in the way that Ian and Barley can replicate Colt.
Colt, yeah, the Colt Bronco.
Yeah, with the disguise. And, that definitely is not a new concept, the idea of impersonating someone else and then things start to go haywire and ears. And, they did it in The Nutty Professor, where when they change back to their original form, things go like the ears and the nose and hands go first.
Oh, right.
And you got to hide it and maintain the facade. Not a lot of it felt new. I can say I don't ever remember a giant Cheeto being used as a boat. And so maybe that was new.
That was pretty original.
But kind of cheesy. And I think this kind of movie, in the same way that the fantasy type of people that Barley are, don't care about that kind of stuff. I think that, because Kelly pointed out, this is like made for D&D people, chugging Red Bulls or energy drinks like the Manticore was, and floating and eating snacks and giant Cheetos in the 70s rock and roll, fantasy painted van, the unicorn van or whatever.
Right.
And cheese doesn't exist in a sort of fantasy fandom, I don't think. And
like
so,
you can't go too cheesy?
Yeah.
I mean, you can be, but there's a difference between homage and like outright replica or copying. I mean, the ending is literally Back to the Future.
Yeah, well, as long as it didn't turn around and soar right into the camera, I was okay with that. I don't think that this movie is derivative. I think that there are a lot of elements that are familiar, and because it works, I think it is and more of an homage. The imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but does that count if it's poorly done? If the flattery is poorly done, like a knockoff? Yeah, I guess the question is whether or not Onward is a poorly done imitation or drawing from these other inspirations, if it's poorly made.
Well, I mean, this wasn't a poorly made film.
Now, Pixar rarely churns out poorly made ones. But getting back to your original focus, which was how it affected you emotionally, like we can pick apart all the little tributes and the things that they borrowed from other movies and tropes and kind of hang on those for enjoyment, even if they don't grip you emotionally, which it really didn't for me for most of the movie. And then you get to the ending, which I don't think adhered to any tropes. And ultimately for me, to my utter surprise, became one of the most emotionally moving Pixar movies ever for me.
So at what point did it make the turn?
I didn't expect the turn where Ian was completing his list.
Yeah.
And I didn't quite get it at first because I thought, well, they definitely took a walk with Dad. He accomplished that, and he was checking it off. And then obviously when it became about Barley, I was like, oh, that's interesting. But it's also kind of a cop-out or a way to satisfy the idea that you failed and you're trying to piece together some semblance of comfort from it or whatever. But
you mean Ian thinking of Barley was like, well, this is my solace because I didn't get to see my dad?
Yeah, the solace just to make himself feel better in the face of a failed mission. And I didn't think that the mission was totally kaput at that point, or I guess the quest, sorry. But definitely there was an emotional impact that I didn't expect when he traded off and let Barley say goodbye to his dad. I didn't expect that, and I was a little bit sad because Ian is our central character, the one who had never met his dad.
It is a little surprising to me that Barley accepted Ian's deferral.
And so I reacted kind of badly to that at first. I was like, no, you're the one. But then obviously he steps up, takes his staff, walks on air, and goes and fights the dragon in the way that only he can. And then you come to acknowledge and accept the fact that he regards Barley as his father figure. And they flash back to them as kids, when he's making his list, and watching Barley interact with the dad, who we only see from afar. I don't know, man. That I missed it up in a way that I haven't done in a Pixar movie since WALL-E.
Well, we couldn't see we couldn't meet the dad, right? Because a dad that we don't see will be so much more emotional than a dad that we do see, because they allowed us to project whatever we wanted to onto that scene from a distance.
Yes. But then Barley gives him a hug, and you can see Ian's face change. And basically he didn't get to meet his dad, but he was at peace with not meeting his dad in a way that was satisfactory. And then, it really made me think how important it was to have an older brother look out for you and teach you all about all the cool stuff like movies and music, and really kind of shape your childhood and personality in a way that's indispensable and really valuable. You're
just going to steal my emotional thunder here?
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Did you cry? I didn't. I don't cry. Well, obviously, I thought about you, and I thought that this did work on an emotional level differently than other films, because I think that kids deal with, losing parents, and kids are adopted, or they always have some weird tragedy or something. But I feel like the real unique thing about the story was the sibling dynamic, and I don't feel that from Frozen with the sisters and stuff like that, but I felt it so much here with the two brothers because of the older brother figure. Did I look back and think of all the embarrassing things that you did and what a dork I thought you were? Yeah. But I also thought about the way that you were there for me. I definitely could project onto those flashback images of times and places where you stood in as a father figure for me, and yeah, it was pretty close to home. So, I don't know. Is this where I thank you for being a...
No, don't do that. That's totally weird. Kelly did say, though, she said it's a movie about siblings.
Yeah, but it's so much more, it's so much more specific than that. Like, we have dad, we've always had dad, but I remember being completely distraught and crying uncontrollably about Matt, and you probably had to muster all your brotherly courage to give me a hug. But you did it. I also remember being really sick, and who knows where mom and dad were, and I think I was in bed all dehydrated and delirious and in my underwear, and you mustered your brotherly courage to pick me up and take me to the hospital. I think you even got me dressed.
I don't know, whatever. But we got to the thing and they called your name and you put your head on my shoulder and I was like, dude, let's go. And you were totally lethargic and on the verge of death and they had to give you 2 bags of fluid. But yeah, the sometimes it's necessary, obviously, when they don't have a father figure or whatever, for them to look out for each other, because they certainly weren't giving mom the opportunity. When mom had to step up, she got a sword and went after the creature, went after the dragon and stuff, but really they were kind of on their own. The best that mom could do was pull the manticore out of there and go drive to meet them on the freeway by car, which I don't know how she knew where they were going to end up. The manticore knew.
Well, she saw in the D&D cards or whatever that they were going to the manticore's tavern, and then from there the manticore had the mission to go and get the sword from the pawn shop.
So nerdy though, this whole thing.
I know, it's really nerdy to even talk about it.
Yeah. So you remember in Lilo and Stitch when Lilo punched the girl in the face, in the first 5 minutes?
Yeah.
closed fist hammer punch to the face. And I was like, whoa. So in this one, the Manticore stuck a lady in the neck with her scorpion tail. And I was like, was that really justified? But she totally tried to gouge them on the price of the sword. That was whack. And I maintain that lady deserved to get stuck in the neck.
Well, they did check in with her that she wasn't dead.
Yeah, we saw it and she wasn't dead. But still, I didn't feel bad. And for an act of violence in a Disney-Pixar movie, I feel like that was totally justified.
So the mom did what she could. I mean, there's always obviously the story about the brothers. And it was surprisingly emotionally satisfying.
Yeah, and Barley the hero, in all respects.
I don't know.
The dad/brother/cool kid.
I mean, he wasn't a wizard.
Yeah, that's a good thing though.
He didn't have an arc.
Nope. I mean, aside from the sibling themes or whatever, and mirroring our own upbringing, maybe that factored in somewhat. I don't know. But I feel like for an adventure kind of quest, they steered away from the utter dorkiness and made it cool and fun and surprisingly emotionally redeeming for me and satisfying in a way that I have to give this movie it was an all right movie. I don't know that this is a legendary Pixar movie for all time, but it earned its keep.
I mean, it's your rating system or whatever, but this is a kind of a totally movie.
Yeah?
I mean,
do you think that you will watch this as many times as you will the classics? Paloma and Aurelia notwithstanding, that you would want to visit this one, because I know like Cars 2, I'll never watch that movie again.
Well, we watched it. It was Paloma's birthday movie, and we were all really excited to watch it together. And she was so happy to sit between her mom and her dad to watch it, to have us both there, like showering her with attention and everything. But the next day, when she wanted to see the Silly Pants again, I was more than happy to watch it again. I mean, you wouldn't totally recommend this to someone? If someone was like, yeah, you'd be like, it's all right.
No, absolutely I would. And I liked a whole lot of things about it. Was surprised by the emotional impact. I don't know if it stands up there with the glory days of The Incredibles and Nemo.
Yeah, you're all jaded.
No, yeah, for sure, I am. So I'm not hoping they surprise me anymore. I'm hoping that they are up to snuff. That they give me what I want and expect, and more often than not they do. This one, however, surprised me. I'm kind of on the fence about the rating. I don't mean that an all right movie is to demean it by any means. It's right on the edge. It's a really good movie.
It's a really good movie. See, this is where your scale becomes more difficult, because this is an easy good for me. We may have poo-pooed it a little bit at the top of this episode, but turns out that was only for dramatic effect, because you get an all right, which is kind of a totally from Wes, a good from Iris, and that's our chat on Onward. Let us know what you think. 818-835-0473. Email us and leave us a voicemail or whatevermovies@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
If you're a working professional wondering what's next for your career, you've come to the right place. Whether you're looking for a promotion, growth, or a potential career transition, look no further. With over 30 years working in a variety of industries, I share my insider knowledge with those ready to get ahead on Career Advancement with Craig Ansell. Tune in to get your strategies for success.
Welcome to the Reverie Channel, where entertainment knows no bounds. Live concerts, on-demand music, documentaries, and short films, all in stunning HD. Now on Roku TV, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. Immerse yourself from home. And on Android and iOS for those on the move. Support creators with crowdfunding donations. Fuel their creativity. Join us in shaping entertainment's future. The Reverie Channel, where every view, every donation matters.
Electricast.